Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another discussion. Today we're going to be talking about Mortal Online 2. There was a recent Q&A that was done on the Twitch channel of almost 3 hours of footage. It was featuring Henrik that was going through all the questions of the chat, and I wanted to bring you guys this detail today because there's a lot of information in here and there's a lot of ambitious plans that the developers have for Mortal Online 2. Fair warning though, this video is going to be all over the place, going to be pretty messy. I wasn't able to compile this information and kind of organize it up because I've just been feeling lazy as hell today. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and talk about it, and I'll deliver the information to you, and then hopefully it'll all work out in the end. For Mortal Online 2, I just want to say first, I won't waste your time too much with this, but no matter how many games I go through in this genre, when it comes to these PvP-based MMOs and Chinese-based Wushu or Wuxia-based MMOs like Age of Wushu, Justice Online, nothing ever really comes close, except for a few select old-school MMORPGs. But in terms of the new-gen stuff or modern day, I've never had as much fun as I do in these games. They deliver a kind of experience that you just don't see these days, and when it comes to the PvP aspects especially, modern day MMOs, PvP just does not interest me anymore. When it comes to the sandbox PvP, it's just on another level, and no matter how many hardships you might have to go through to get to that good soft spot of enjoying it, it's 100% worth it. So no matter what, I hope that Mortal Online 2 finds a lot of success no matter what I'm playing at the time when it releases, or if I never even step foot in the game during its early access period or launch, I still want this game to succeed in games like it, because I'm a huge believer in the idea that we should have multiple different MMOs that fulfill different niches rather than just one or two that try to do everything but end up failing at everything basically. So for Mortal Online 2, I'll go ahead and just start talking about what they were discussing during the actual Q&A. It was 3 hours long. I'm just going to go ahead and start talking about the detail. He didn't have anybody helping him with this when he did the Q&A, and he also wasn't able to say the questions out loud before he answered them, so I wasn't able to write down what the questions exactly were, but I was just taking notes as I went along while watching him in full screen. So one of the first things they talked about is the changes that would be coming to the magic system and what kinds of schools of magic we would see. So one of the first things he said is that they're going to be implementing what's known as spiritism and different kinds of schools of magic in general. But the spiritism one is the one that he focused on specifically, which would also include the ability to resurrect players. Already they've added some baseline spells for their magic system, mostly consistent of offensive spells, but they'll be adding more in the future, so we'll be able to see different kinds of them, possibly even necromancy and things like that. I also have played around a little bit with the magic system in the current testing phase for MO, and so far it's been pretty nice. They also expand on this later, how it's not going to be something where it just kind of fills up your entire screen. It's going to be more simplistic and seamless with how the magic actually executes in combat, so that's something to keep in mind too. And they will also be implementing the mount system. Actually on the 25th of March, just in about 10 days or so, there is going to be another stress test, so that's going to be something that you'll want to make sure to keep an eye out for. If you are already a part of the Mortal Online 2 testing phase, which you can actually buy into for 40 bucks on their regular Mortal Online website, you will be able to test this out right alongside everybody else and even afterwards too. So that'll be something to check out if you're interested in that as well, and if you want to just follow the progress of the development as it's going along. They also talked about how the horses that we will have access to, there's going to be different types of them. Just like I talked about how in the last video that different characters will have like different kinds of weight and different kinds of height based off of what race you choose. Well, there's going to be different horses that have different characteristics to them. So you might have horses that are like slower but can carry more items. So if you're transporting a lot of resources and stuff like that, you'll have ones that you can choose that are better for that. And then you might have ones that are like faster, or you'll have some that are able to carry somebody of a bigger weight class, stuff like that. And also they mentioned that not just horses would be a thing, but ones like direwolves and bears might possibly be a thing as well. Mounted combat and mounted archery will also have a place in the game, but they're still working with that, so we probably won't see anything like that soon. For the next major patch that's going to be coming into the game, they're also going to be adding Tendrum and Toxai. So these are two different regions in the game, and I don't remember Toxai from the first game as much, but I spent a lot of time around Tendrum, in and around it during the Steam launch for Mortal Online, and also I had played years beforehand and had spent some time around Tendrum as well, but I didn't really get full deep into the game until the Steam launch itself, and I had a lot of fun. I have a lot of stories about Mortal Online, but I ended up in a guild called Pyre, and I was able to encounter guilds like RPK, dreadlords and dread, and I was able to even engage in wars with these kinds of people and step on the battlefields with these absolute monsters, which was something I never thought I'd be able to do as a freshly new player coming into a game with all these vets in a PvP MMO. But let me tell you, it's these kinds of games that change your perspective really quick the farther you go in them. Alongside the regions, they're also going to be adding like different camps, like bandit camps, for instance, which also the NPC bandits are actually a thing already in the testing phase. And I was able to fight them a little bit. Their pathing and whatnot, it's not the most complex right now, but they do have actual plans for that too, which we will be diving to a little bit later. But that's going to be a thing. They're going to be adding more than likely more NPC camps, like the Rissar Horde probably. Which the Rissar Horde is actually, I believe the Thurser race is has its own NPC group called the Rissar Horde, as I'm assuming what it is, because you can actually choose a clade or like a starting bonus where you can actually become neutral or maybe even possibly friendly in the future with this Rissar Horde. So that might be like a beneficial thing to have if you want to become friendly with them or live around them kind of thing. But we'll have to see how exactly that happens in game though. They're also going to be adding things like wandering NPCs, like the wandering priest. And the priest is basically the NPC that you would resurrect at if you died. But there's also going to be another mechanic tied to the bounty system for the priest. So that's going to be something that'll be really cool as well. But we'll talk about that one later too, because they did mention that. One question asked is that if there would be an endgame map, and there will not be one for Mortal Online 2 like you would see in World of Warcraft, but there will be cartography, like a skill you could use to map out the areas you could explore. We're not sure exactly if we'll be able to sell these maps or anything like that. That part of the stream was kind of low on the volume, so I couldn't make everything out, but we do have cartography that will be a thing in the future, so that'll be pretty interesting to see what we can do with that. There will also be a bounty system in place that they're planning to add. So people that are wondering like what kind of restrictions they'll have against player killing and what kind of penalties will be implemented, there's actually another really interesting thing we'll talk about later. But the bounty system was one of the first things they went over. So basically what you can do is anytime somebody dies, like if you get killed out in the wilderness by a player, you resurrect at a priest like I talked about. Apparently we'll be able to tell the priest what happened, like how we died. So we can tell them like this player X and X killed me. And then I guess that's gonna like have some kind of vetting system or something's gonna happen where basically that report is going to be transferred to the citizens inside the settlement as well as the guards. And then bounty hunters can actually go and buy a ticket, like a bounty ticket. These tickets will be valid for like an X amount of hours. And essentially what you can do is you can go to these cities and talk to the guards and talk to the NPCs, I guess. And you can find out like who are the players in the areas that might have like a bounty on their head or have committed crimes. You can actually use investigation, like your own investigation skills, to find these players and try to claim that bounty. But a bounty, like they said, a bounty will run out after a certain amount of time, so it's important to investigate and work fast. But that'll be a really interesting system to see how that goes. So anybody that has ever wanted to do like bounty hunter guilds or is looking for games like that, this might be a thing in this game as well. But there's also a reputation system that we're going to talk about, like I said, and that's also going to play a part in your interaction in the world and what you'll be blocked off of or what you'll have access to based off of if you're like a good player that doesn't really kill people and helps people or does like missions and stuff for NPCs versus a person that just goes around like killing people all day. Another thing that was talked about, yeah, there will be another stress test for this game. They haven't opened it up yet, but it'll be on a first come first serve basis when it comes to the keys and when they start coming out. So you'll want to make sure you grab one of those as soon as possible. Keep track of their website and their Discord. The only date they have right now is for the 25th of this month for the stress test. They don't have a designated date for the early access launch yet or anything like that. But you'll still be able to test the game during the entire time that it's being developed. Like I said, if you want to. Used to be where we had to pay like $120 to get into this ongoing alpha, which at the time I wasn't really, even though I love Mortal, I wasn't really wanting to pay that much at the moment. But as soon as I saw that they went down to 40 though, I jumped on that immediately because that's a pretty decent price to be able to test the game up until its launch and even afterwards too. In terms of crafting, they did answer a question if you would need to maximize your skill to be an effective craftsman, because I believe we will only have a certain amount of skill points that we can actually put into stuff. We won't be able to like maximize everything on one character because this game will have a very important like social aspect. So you'll have to like trade with other players if you need something specific, or you'll like need to be in a guild if you want to have like a leather worker and then like a weaponsmith, that kind of thing. You probably won't be able to do everything on one character, but you can actually start crafting maximum quality stuff at 70 crafting skill, for instance. This way you have more room to maneuver your skill points and like go into other things too. But that being said, if you did become a grandmaster, Henrik said that there will be things that you can apply to items you craft, like visually cosmetic effects, like maybe a royal effect or something that makes equipment stand out from the crowd. So I don't know if they're going to have like glow effects or what they're planning, but that's going to be a thing that you'll actually be able to have like cosmetic effects or your like own signature style if you become a grandmaster kind of thing. When it comes to how storing items work, like in your house, if you want to store a poleaxe, for instance, they want to expand on how that will work and go more towards the realism side. So they'll be expanding with things like siege tents, transportation wagons, sieging machines, and how items are stored in general. Also, alongside the taming system being implemented, breeding will also be a thing in the future alongside fishing for those that are interested. In terms of the AI behavior, they've already been making some pretty big progress, so in the future we should be seeing a much more polished AI pathing system, which includes more dangerous behavior when in combat. So there's going to be like different kinds of advanced AI, simplistic AI, and Henrik even stated specifically that there will be different behavior AI between simple mobs and even boss mobs. And speaking of boss mobs, later on in the stream, Henrik talked about how they plan to add dragons, but they want to make sure that it does more than just stand there and has like events and content tied to it as opposed to just a boss fight and that's it. So me speculating, I'm thinking maybe they'll have like a dragon raid like on a town or something that'll also come with their advanced AI. And Henrik said every specific mob will utilize different behavior, and some mobs will be more complex and tied to world events as well. And as soon as the system is ready, we'll start seeing it in smaller forms because there will be lesser creatures that utilize the same system. It won't just be the dragon. Also on the dungeon side of the game, not just the ones we've seen in the first games, but other ones are going to be added, like more intricate spider caves, which will not only include like the spiderlings, but also the spider queens. And I think I've already seen the foundations of one of them while I was out exploring. I took a trip to a castle over near one of the northern towns, and it looks like it had a dungeon that we could possibly go into later and actually fight mobs in that'll be spawned in there. I was kind of getting scared, so I didn't go too deep into it, but I'm sure they're probably going to add something there in the future. Also, they're going to be adding much more polish and complex designs to the mainland of the game before expanding the landmass. So basically, the island that we're going to be playing on, they're going to start making that more like a living, breathing world with plenty of secrets to be discovered, as Henrik said. And only after they're done with that will they then start on the next continent, which is something that I really like, because when it comes to innovating on these new gen MMORPGs, I feel like something that's crucial is doing exactly that. Like if you took all the players out but you kept everything else in the game in, then if it feels like its own landmass with all these people, creatures, and animals all living in their own way, I'm talking like people walking throughout the cities, maybe doing some kind of basic interaction or advanced interaction with the game world, people wandering out in the wilderness that you can either fight, take missions from possibly, or just interact with in general. Maybe even giant fights that you can actually get into in the wilderness that are between two NPC humanoid groups of people, which we're actually going to talk about in a second because they did mention that too. That's what I think games really need to do. You need to have more than just us as the players populate your game and we're the ones that have to create the content for ourselves. Because even though that's the baseline of what MMOs were actually built off of, if you want to be something truly next gen, then I feel like it'd be great if you just put players into something that's already going on and they just feel like they're being immersed and becoming a part of the world instead of the ones that have to create it themselves, kind of thing, if that makes sense. But for the stealth aspect of the game, they stated that there will be some sort of camouflage related to the magic side of the game. So basically you might be able to cast a spell to not become full invisible but reduce visibility range in PvP. So set up like ambushes on the roads or do stuff like that, whatever you really want to do. And for all the different weapon groups in the game, they do plan to add effects that can be utilized in those categories. Like for dagger, one interesting thing they want to expand on is being able to add poison, and you might be able to learn different ways to apply that poison with the dagger, like being able to do like a thrust, for instance, and that'll have a better way of applying the poison than like if you try to slash them, or if you don't go through the armor, then it might not apply poison, but if you hit them directly on the skin, then that'll have a much better chance of applying it. And he said that he's not really sure if they're going to do it where it's like different types of directional moves are more effective, or if it's just like a button on your hotbar that you can press and then you're able to execute an attack that's more likely to apply the poison or not, kind of thing. And oh, for the questing system in the game, there's not going to be different quests that you can do per se that you're like required to do, but there will be like different missions that you can accept or do for the NPCs. And then there also might be different like dynamic events or lore related things that will trigger in the actual game world just by default. Kind of like the dragon raid idea that we talked about. That might become a thing, since the way he was talking about it, it sounds like he's going to have the dragons be tied to the game events as well. And along with the poison effect, like for the daggers, there will be a thievery system that'll be a thing, but they're still working on it and ironing out the kinks. They wanted to have more of a risk to reward ratio and overall improve the experience of it before we see it. And then for the starting zones, they plan to have a tutorial area called Haven that we're going to initially spawn into. This is where we're going to be led through the basic systems and be prepared for life in the game. So I think we had a tutorial zone like this back in like, what was it, I don't know if it was 2015 or 2012-ish, but I remember before the Steam launch that there was a time period where we did spawn into an area like that. I don't remember that much about it, but I do remember trying to whack a deer and just utterly failing and getting my butt kicked by a deer because I kept hitting I think I was hitting it with the handle instead of the actual weapon itself. Something was going on there, but it was a fun experience. And then after we're done with the Haven area, then we would actually spawn into one of the different starting locations on the map, because we won't all spawn in the same place. There's going to be different ones based off of like our character statistics, like whatever race we might pick, or like our ancestry or something like that. There's going to be different ones that we'll actually be spawning into. And also for the GM side, instead of the way that they provided in-game GMs in Mortal Online 1, which is kind of funny because I do have a couple stories about GMs. But anyway, this time around they plan to hire a team of professional external hires, and these won't be players, so they're going to make sure it's fair gameplay. But in terms of in-game events, they're going to be very careful of that, because they don't want that to kind of encourage like biases or anything like that if a GM triggers an event but only does it at certain periods of the day or like for certain people kind of thing. They would rather them be automated, like automated dynamic events, things that are tied to the system itself rather than somebody just triggering it. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was a big one. It was kind of hard to hear Henrik when he said the name of the system, but I believe he said that it's called the Crowd System with Unreal Engine 4. But basically what happens is there's a group of humanoids in this game that are fighting a war like out in the open world, like full-on armies, not even small groups of NPCs, but you could have like a army of like, I don't know, 100. He didn't give exact numbers, but like 100v100 for instance. And that could be going on without any players being involved whatsoever. Or maybe there's like hundreds, who knows? But apparently this will be something that we could actually join into like on the fly. Like we'll just start seeing NPCs going at it at certain points of the world. And then players or guilds can probably just jump into that and start going ham on people, which sounds absolutely amazing. That's something that I've been looking for in MMOs for so long. I really hope this works out. He did mention that performance-wise, going into these areas, obviously it might take a little bit of a hit, but he said it'll be up to the player if you want to like actually go into these areas or not, and kind of like test out your hardware, so to speak. But for the other professions, like we talked about earlier, fishing is going to be something that they are planning to implement. There's probably going to be even more, but fishing was the one that he mentioned specifically during this Q&A through one of the questions. Breeding was also another one too, if anybody is interested in that as well. And for the new player experience, they plan to have an NPC trainer that has voice acting to give players like information and feedback, things that'll be vital to success, because in the first game it could have been a little hard for a new player to get into it initially. These kinds of games especially, they don't really hold your hands. You really have to figure out a lot of this stuff for yourself, but they want to make it a little bit more seamless this time. So there's going to be that NPC trainer with voice acting, and he'll also set you up with like communication tools that'll connect you to guilds, communities, etc., and help you with some of the baseline systems so you at least have some idea of what's going on. And another thing they mentioned like later on towards the end of the stream was when somebody asked if you'd be able to transfer like anything at all from Mortal Online 1, which I wouldn't really expect you to be able to since they're two different MMOs, but I guess it's a sequel to it, so maybe that's why people would ask that kind of thing. But anyway, the direct answer was that you wouldn't be able to like transport items or money or anything like that directly, but there might be a way to receive benefits that will help you over time. So I think the example he gave was the veteran points in Mortal Online 1. I don't fully remember how we got the veteran points there. I remember getting it from, I think, ordering one of the Kickstarter packages, because I remember you could buy the capes, and I remember having a cape on my main account, and I don't remember what package I got, but I'm pretty sure we got veteran points with those too, alongside getting the capes. And I don't know what we used them for, because, well, Henrik said that in the first game, you would be able to, like, in Tendrum, occupy a building, which I don't remember ever trying that, but it might give you bonuses for like rested XP or help you with logging out kind of thing, be like a safe place to log out, and it had other benefits and that kind of thing. Like the veteran points might be something that you might be able to transfer from Mortal Online 1 to 2. So that'll be pretty interesting to see. I'm actually curious if I still have any, but he also mentioned that in Mortal Online 1 you would be able to like set up a personal shop, which I think I remember that. I don't know for sure, honestly. I only spent like a week in Tendrum before I dipped out and went southeast to, I can't remember the first city name that I was in after Tendrum, but all I know is when I left Tendrum, I met Pyre, because there was actually a really cool experience where in the town I moved to, the forge or the blacksmith was like outside of town when I wanted to cook metal or use it. So there was this group that was like a PK group that would always be sitting around it and trying to camp people that were going to it. But one day this guild called Pyre came in and they rallied all the people that lived in the city together, like all the players, and we just beat everybody out of there, which was really cool. And then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and join up with these guys. And then I think about 2 clicks east of that was where we were living, because they had a palisade there and they didn't have any benches or anything like that, but I helped them early on build a lot of those benches, which was really awesome. But yeah, I don't remember a player shop system, but apparently that might be a thing we can do in Mortal Online 2 if we were able to do that in 1. And then after the Q&A was like mostly done, he started showing us a little bit of what they were working on. So this screenshot right here is actually the castle of the Emperor in Mortal Online 2. I believe he said it was the Tendrimic castle as well, but this is their latest version of what the castle design will be. And apparently the screenshot doesn't actually do it justice, because the castle is really huge. And he said that there's going to be a huge amount of lore tied to it, and also that they're going to be doing a stream later on that'll actually talk about the lore and the story aspects some more. But I'm unsure if we'll be able to fight the Emperor himself. At the moment, they said that we'll only be able to walk up to the castle and view it from the outside. But later on, apparently, they will be expanding on the reputation system. So if you want to get access to the inner circle or get inside the castle, you can't just do this as like a regular player. And this is also a really, really cool thing that ties into the bounty system too. But you need to have a high reputation, good record, and then maybe you'll be able to get in. So you might be able to meet the actual Emperor himself. And the reputation system is already available for the city guards. If you have a high reputation in the area, they might salute you or show respect, but a low one, like I managed to get in the testing phase, and they might say like you're scum or get out of my city or your mother was a hamster, like stuff like that they'll say to you in the game. And the reputation system will be tied deeply into the world and how players and NPCs will see you. And Henrik said that this will be a way to deter against constant murder, because there might be consequences that will stack themselves against you. Not only the nations, but also the monsters and even gods, which sounds extremely epic, because being hunted by a god, I mean, that's like one of the coolest things that you could possibly have happen. And they also briefly talked about the mobs that they're working on. Currently, the game doesn't have a huge amount of creatures in the world, but they're constantly working on future ones that will be showing up. Ones that'll have the advanced AI and the simplistic AI like we talked about earlier. And the early access will have a large list of them. They don't have a date for the early access yet, but like I said, the stress test will be on the 25th, and then they'll keep people updated as things go. But one of the creatures they talked about and showcased was the troll. So they have the cave troll, and this is what it'll look like here, but there's going to be different types of them out in the world. And they also mentioned that a minotaur will show up at some point, but they didn't actually have a screenshot to showcase that though. The map itself, I've explored it a little bit, and it seems like a pretty decent sized map, but I was waiting until we got mounts before going too in depth with it. But like they said, they're going to have a lot of different hidden secrets, and they're going to add a lot of detail to the map itself before they even expand onto the other continents. So I'm really curious to see how this goes, but I'd like to actually explore it when the mounts do become a thing very soon and see what other things they already have in the game at the moment. But that was all the detail we got so far. I know there's probably a couple things that I missed, but that was pretty much the majority of the gist of it. But we'll see what happens with that though. Hopefully they keep going and everything goes okay. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry about the messy discussion, but hopefully I was able to teach you a couple things about what this game is and where it's going. And as always, have a wonderful night or day, folks, and farewell.